Hello, everybody. We are live.
Hello.
Hopefully you can hear us. I think so. I am here. Mark is here, and we have two people, not just one. Today we have the magic of video chat, where we're going all the way over the pond to John and Oliver, who are coming to us live from. Where are each of you, John? John, you're in Ireland? Is that correct?
No, I'm in Scotland.
Scotland, sorry.
Right at the northwest coast of Scotland. If you go a bit further north than me, you fall off the edge.
Wow.
Of the world. Yeah,
Is it cold? Is it cold up there?
Well, at the moment, England has been experiencing mid 35 degrees centigrade.
I heard.
That's hot.
It is hot.
Up here, we're just sort of grey and damp and a bit blustery because that's what Scotland is.
No, I know.
It's that good today. Gosh, because normally it's quite miserable up there, isn't it? So
yeah, I mean, I can see some blue sky from.
I didn't want to
outside
say
my
it
window.
like that. I didn't want to be like, so is it miserable there today? How is it? But I've actually never been to Scotland, but I do hear everyone has the same stories. They talk about the drinking, they talk about the hearty food, and they talk about the weather.
Yeah, well, you need when the weather's kicking off outside, you need to just draw the curtains, light the fire, pour yourself a decent double malt whiskey, and and enjoy a nice broth or something like that, because the weather can be challenging at times, but the scenery is worth it.
So, and then we have Oliver. Where are you, Oliver?
I live in a small village called Groombridge, which is about 30 miles from London.
Oh, okay.
So I'm in the south of England, where it's always sunny and happy. It is unusually blessed with quite good weather generally, but this is on the basis of England.
Right.
So, which means we get slightly less rain and slightly more sunny days than other parts of England on average. It's
I can only imagine what it's like there, because I was in London 18 years ago on July 4th. And that was during the heat wave. And at that point, it was 90 degrees, which is obviously, I don't know what that is in C, but it's like, what's that, like 28 or 27 or something?
Yeah.
Have a little look.
And
35 degrees is about 95 Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
so
and
yeah,
that was like a heat wave. That was like the hottest I think it ever was for that day, and that was 18 years ago. And I remember people were miserable at 90 degrees. So, and I've been hearing about how hot it is. I was thinking, oh man, because it took us a long time to find a hotel with air conditioning, and because
we don't do air conditioning because
we
don't need it.
Well, I'll tell you,
It's never warm.
you say that, except here's something. So back in the 80s, my wife went to school in Arizona. Here's the crazy part. Do you know that they don't have air conditioning in Arizona? And it's like, wait a second, Arizona is really hot. Why don't they have air conditioning? Because it's hot during the day, but it's cold at night. And so what people used to do is they would sleep outside. They have these things called sleeping porches, and they would literally sleep on a porch outside, and that is their air conditioning. And this is back in the 80s and the 90s. I was in Arizona last couple months ago. Let me tell you, they all have air conditioning now. Those days are gone. Yeah. And I think you guys are about to do what we did, or what at least Arizona did 30 years ago. It's like, maybe it's time to start installing air conditioning everywhere. So
it could be signs of the times, I suppose.
I think so. I mean, nowadays, one of the most popular buys at this time of the year was you walk into one of the big supermarkets, are these little portable air conditioning units.
Well, I got a fan.
The fan old-fashioned now. What you want the little air conditioning unit, shove the little nozzle outside the window, and you're peachy. But yeah, I mean, England, you talk about people complaining about the weather. In England, everybody complains about the weather all the time.
Really?
So it's either too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry. There's this very, very difficult to reach middle bit where people are happy. But most of the time, the British like to moan about the weather.
I imagine so. Well, I think everyone moans about the weather. Although I'm in New York, and I have to say, kind of the same. It's hot in the summer, it's cold in the winter. It's sort of
Well, it was lovely to be on. We'll talk some gaming next time.
Yeah. That's my. Well, no, yeah, that's it. No,
we're segueing. I get it. We're segueing.
We're segueing. Well, people want to hear. People want to hear. Well, that's what's going on in your part of the world. Yeah, no, we have you two on. You're from Spidermind Games, where you have these cool books. We'll get into a little while. Legendary Kingdoms, which is, God, this thing is so big. I had the first one, and then John was nice enough to give me the second one at Gen Con, and I'm looking at this monster, and I'm just like, wow, this thing is a monster. Yeah. I didn't even start looking at it, but we'll talk about that. And then, of course, you have the very, 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 very popular Dragon Eye dice, which are dice with dragons in them. Who knew that would be so popular?
Yeah, Dragon Eyes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's literally Dragon Eye dice.
Do you want to talk about them, John? Because they're your baby, really, rather than mine.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to talk about the Dragon Eye dice if that's what you're happy for me to start off with.
If you want to talk a little bit about it, so people that aren't familiar necessarily, and I do have pictures of them. If you're looking right now, I have a red Dragon Eye dice next to John and a green one next to Oliver, so you can see what they look like.
It first began with this idea of I'm a bit of a dice goblin. And so the question of, can anybody have too many dice is, of course, answered with no, you always need more. And if you're watching this and you're agreeing with me, then you too are a dice goblin. And I was always on the lookout for the extra special new thing. And for a while, the new thing was inclusions, i.e. bits dropped into the middle of the resin. And this can be anything from glitter to pieces of the inside of watches, to skulls, to ducks, to everything in between. And they looked great, except for the fact that when you drop something into resin before it's cured, it'll usually sink to the bottom, or it doesn't always sit nicely in the middle of the dice. So it doesn't matter what type of dice you buy. And there were some Dragon Eye dice of sorts. I don't think I call them Dragon Eye dice, but there were these little sort of flat cabochons, which were circular printed dragon eyes with a bit of glass over the top that were being dropped into dice. And I bought a set. And it was just a little unsatisfactory. They looked great if you angle the eye to look at you from one facet, but from the rest of the view of the dice, it was just a bit, I don't know, just a bit flat. And I was always dreaming about this idea of having dragon eyes in the middle of dice, but instead of having them on a flat disc, they were actually printed on a eyeball and placed in the center of the dice. And would this be possible? And then, of course, would it be possible to not just have these eyeballs looking out at you, but looking out at you through the facet that have the top number of that particular dice? You roll a natural 20, and instead of the numbers 2 and 0 looking at you, you've got the dragon eye looking at you. So we approached the company that we worked on, our manufacturing company that we worked on, to produce previous releases such as our Level Up and our Ice Dice trays, to try and come up with a way of making this eyeball sit directly in the dead center of the dice and look out through the top facet. And after quite a lot of iterations and more work than we really thought was going to be involved in creating new dice, we've managed to crack it. And with the help of 8,500 backers on Kickstarter, we've managed to produce the first set. Well, we launched the campaign tail end of last year. It was for the chromatic dragons. So that's the red, the blue, the green, the white, and the black. We released those, raised some money, have now developed them. They are in production as we speak, and we're hoping to get development underway tail end of October. Fulfillment underway at tail end of October. And then, assuming that they are fulfilled and out to backers and in their hands, then we're looking to release the second campaign, which will be for the metallic dragons sometime sort of first quarter of next year.
Yes, I look forward to my set Oh, did I say that? Oh, sorry.
We can sort that out.
I look forward to my set.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a pile of the ones that we showed off at Gen Con here, and they look amazing.
Yeah, they look
really, really
awesome. I know that this one, when this launched, I remember this was like all over Kickstarter and Facebook. It was everywhere. This thing got very hot very quickly. So, but the main reason we are here is that we are going to be talking about choose your own adventure books, and you can use the Dragon Eye dice with these books, from what I understand, at least the ones that you're writing, the Legendary Kingdom books. So
yes,
before we begin, I just thought maybe each of us can talk about our experiences with these choose your own adventure books, because so I'm a child of the 80s, and I think, John, you're probably a child of the 80s. I don't know. Are you also a child of the 80s, Oliver? Yep.
Yes.
So, like,
baby face, I know.
Yeah,
yes, I know, actually,
because these books, like, people talk about D&D in the 80s and other things, but like, this was a big deal. This was like the Harry Potter for us. This was very popular. I read them all. I would go through the books and do every iteration to make sure that you saw the endings. I even had the one where, what was the one where, the spaceship one, where there was a secret ending, but the only way you can get to it is turn to the page. There was no direct way to get to it. I don't know if you know that. There's like, all the endings were like okay to bad, and there was only one good ending, but there was no way to get to it. You actually had to cheat. It was actually funny. And so Choose Your Adventure in the US were very popular, but I know in the UK you had what's the Steve Jackson fighting
Fighting
books.
Fantasy,
Yes, and those were very popular.
It was hugely popular. I mean, really, I mean, in my first ever role-playing game I wrote, I talked about my adventures in Dungeons and Dragons, but a year before that, I had my real introduction to what RPGs could be, which was a book called The Warlock of Firetop Mountain.
Yes.
And a friend of mine called Simon read it to me and my brother. We were quite young, about 8 years old. And while we were, I'm terribly sorry.
Oh.
No, one more. I'll just stop that.
Ooh, phones going off. Hey, John, tell us about your experiences with Choose Your Own Adventure books and Firetop Mountain.
I have to say, my experience with Choose Your Own Adventure style of game books are more recent. I knew of Fighting Fantasy when it first existed, but I never played it. My introduction to D&D in total, role-playing games in total, was through my librarian at school. She was a massive Cthulhu fan. She became our GM. But I never.
Your librarian's like, hey, little kid, well, you're interested in Call of Cthulhu?
Oh, she was an absolute legend.
I expect so. I'm sure the parents were thrilled.
It was.
I will say this: if you have a librarian in character in a game who asks you if you're interested in Cthulhu and wants to show you some book,
I know. I mean, this is like,
not say yes, because you are not going to wind up in a good situation.
This sounds like the beginning of Stranger Things. What is going on? I'm like, hey, little kid.
She was brilliant. She got me, and I would say pretty much there were 6 of us in our class that were. I mean, we weren't massive D&D nerds already. This was our proper introduction. It was a Tuesday and a Thursday. I was in a boarding school, so we lived in school during the week.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And me and some of my mates were waiting outside the refectory, the cafe, to have like afternoon tea. It's a thing we English people do. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, it was biscuits and tea or coffee. Tuesdays and Thursdays, it was cakes. And everybody would queue up for their cakes. And in the library, you'd see 2 groups of people sat around tables fussing over paper. That was all they literally did for hours. And we stood out in the rain waiting for our cakes. And in comes this massive tray of cakes. I quickly do the maths. I'm like, hang on a second. We're only allowed 1 cake each. And in there are more cakes than the bodies that are in that room. What's going on there? Because I want more cake. And that was what led me to go in there one day and ask and say, what's going on here? And Jan Perfect, our librarian, said, come and take a seat. And and I sat next to one of my best mates, Abby, who I didn't realize was, a secret geek. She was massively into her Cthulhu, I found out later on. And she talked and walked me through my first game of Call of Cthulhu at the age of 12. Amazing. And
Wow.
I've never looked back. But honestly, as far as choose your own adventure style game books, the first time I played one was after Oliver recommended one. I had not
Wow.
touched one beforehand.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, Oliver, before you were rudely interrupted by your phone going on,
I don't even know what that was.
have you not told everybody you're on a live show?
Yeah, I haven't received a phone call for a long time. However, not that it put me off my stride.
No.
Anyway, I was introduced to a Fighter Fantasy game called Warlock of Firetop Mountain. It's quite famous. I mean, I think even now across the pond. And it's the first kind of like Dungeons and Dragons light game book that was ever produced, at least as far as I know. And in the fact that it had stats and a combat system and so forth. And Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone were both huge Dungeons and Dragons fans. They were the importer of Dungeons and Dragons through the company Games Workshop, which was a very different company then than it is now. Yes, they were scratching their heads about how to increase take up on Dungeons and Dragons, because they thought if it could have a big enough boost, then everyone will be getting D&D. But as it turned out, fighting fantasy was its own gaming phenomenon. It sold something like 15 million bucks over its over the course of its life. Which is amazing. They released 60 books, I think, in total, the original.
Whoa.
But it was, even so, 50 million is a lot by anyone's imagination. We should be so lucky. And so it was this huge phenomenon. Everyone I knew had played at least one fighting fantasy, even if they never used the rules, and they just used it like a choose your own adventure book. And they just decided, oh, I've beaten that monster, or no, I've been lucky here, or no, I've passed my skill check. I'll see what happens. And it was my first ever window into the core of what fantasy gaming is, which is going into a strange and dangerous place, trying to make the right decisions, and then coming out slightly better at the end of each good decision and slightly worse at the end of each poor one, which is really what Dungeons and Dragons is about in a nutshell, when you strip everything away. And it's that kind of, addictive core, which is the heart of everything. We often like to kind of kid ourselves that, it's all about the story. Sort of.
Really? Well, I would say, I don't know, I like the story too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. No, the story adds sugar on top, and you can have a dreary old game. You can have the world's most dull Dungeons and Dragons game, if you don't have something to put it over the top. But it is those aspects of D&D, of the, you're always just slightly getting better all the time. Whether it's a case of you're getting richer, you're getting experience points, and you're going up level, you're going up levels, you're going deeper in terms of stories, you're becoming more connected, you're learning more things, so you know how to defeat certain monsters, and you've got to set fire to that troll, don't go and punch the gelatinous cube, and all these sorts of hundreds of tiny little rules and structures that all build up to make a real kind of like sugar and fat experience. It's a very tasty formula that Gygax and Arnson fell on, and I think Fighting Fantasy just tried to digest that down to its essential core. So yeah, it was hugely influential, and it allowed me to understand what Dungeons and Dragons was when I got to play it a year later.
Yeah, and I mean, people don't talk about that because, at least in the U.S., because we play Choose Your Own Adventure, but overseas, I mean, I heard about those books, and until the age of the internet, you couldn't really get them. But I've seen pictures of, like, as you said, like 50 of these books. I'm like, 50? I haven't even heard of like I saw like one, maybe two. The ones I have been playing, though, because Sorcery parts 1 through 4 came out as a computer game, and those are really good. Those if you haven't tried, if you want to try a fighting fantasy type game, on the computer, the sorcery books, and all 4
Literally,
are done.
Fighting Fantasy is also on like Warlock.
Yeah, that one's on too.
Mountain, and the other ones are also on Steam.
Yeah. And I used to collect some of these books as well on apps. There's a lot of these apps that are very similar. But basically the difference is like Choose Your Own Adventures you just read, but then the Fighting Fantasy is that you actually roll up characters and then you play a character in the book. And then Mark, real quick, we were mentioning that Pathfinder, the beginner's box, actually has a Fighting Fantasy Choose Your Own Adventure in there. Correct?
Yes. It does, and that's sort of a core thing. It was in the 1st edition and 2nd edition Pathfinder beginner box. So when you're just starting off, it's sort of a solo adventure that you can read through and run on your own. And it is like Fighting Fantasy because you roll a d20 and you add some modifiers and you sort of learn a little bit about the rules of the game while choosing your own adventure. That is right.
Yeah.
I thought we were talking about our experiences with.
Well, now you can talk about your experiences, Mark. Well, I thought, isn't that part of your experience? Did you help write that or know anything about that? I thought maybe that'd be part of it, but you can talk about your experience.
Jason Bowman wrote that Choose Your Own Adventure for the beginner box.
All right.
I did a pass on it. I wrote a lot of the other things in the beginner box.
That counts.
Sure, fair enough. So I guess when you say child of the 80s, you mean like older child of the 80s, like in actual childhood. I'm a child of the 80s in the sense that I was a very, very little child during some of the 80s.
Right.
So I'm a little bit younger, but I still had a bunch of Choose Your Own Adventure books when I was a kid, and I would do it like you did, Stephen, where I would always try to get all the endings. But I feel like later in life, I understood things like depth first search and recursion better because of the way I did Choose Your Own Adventures, which was that I would make note by like marking the pages or taking track of them, all of the times I had made a choice. And then when I reached an ending, instead of starting at the beginning again, I would go back to the most recent choice and then take the next choice on the list of the ones that I had not taken. And so that's how I did it and saved myself some time as like a little kid. And then later on in life, I didn't think about it, but that is kind of like, right, it's kind of like recursion depth. And you know, I'm storing up all of these pointers of where to go back to and going back to the one that was before that. So I do feel like it had some influence on my way of thinking about those kind of things. And I think it's definitely useful for GMs who, or especially adventure authors in published adventures. Understanding about Choose Your Own Adventures lets you learn how to deal with like possible branches and sort of the structure of adventures that are written trying to take into account basic things that the PCs can do and with multiple slight possibilities. I know some published adventures don't go off on the side branches. They're just like, just do this or else the GM figures it out. But there's some that are like, okay, if the PCs did it this way, then this thing changes.
Look at that, Mark's getting us back on topic. How dare you?
But being able to have that skill of being able to develop as the PCs make their choices, being able to develop and move with those choices gives the player. I am one of those people that suffer from the what they call the Matt Mercer effect these days. I have GM'd, but I didn't particularly enjoy it. I didn't feel confident, and I don't feel like I am that flexible in my thinking to be able to just develop when the PCs decide they want to go off in that direction. Just go, yeah, that's cool, because we've also got, I have in my head also this path you can follow. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Mark. When people are writing adventures, they really do need to keep in their head this idea that the PCs will go where the PCs want to, and let them, because it gives them this real feeling of a sandbox adventure. It's why Oliver's a cracking GM, and one I wouldn't trade in for all the tea in China because it's well, there you go. But it's true. It's being able to get that feeling of being in a complete sandbox that it's what choose your own adventure type books give you.
So for the Matt Mercer effect, I'll explain that in case people who are watching haven't heard about it, but it's a common effect where people who are watching Critical Role and they see just like what's going on at that table, and then they're like, oh no, maybe that means I'm not good enough as a DM or GM to GM. But I'll say for all everyone out there, not just John, who may be suffering from the Matt Mercer effect, you need to remember not only that obviously he is doing this professionally and is a professional actor, but also that he has already seeded a bunch of stuff with his players ahead of time and planned it out and gotten like agreements and other things like that to make sure that they understand where some of the plot points are going to go, because it's a show. So between those two factors, just never ever let that look to you like something that a GM should be able to do all of those things every time.
Even beyond that, there are many kinds of games master, and there's no one right type. And I look at Matt Mercer and I see that he never stumbles over his words. He never has kind of thinking time. And I go, oh no, I wish I could do that. I wish I could have that fluency of speech. But no one ever complains. Really, when I do my adventures, they seem to sort of hang and wonder. And so you can be games masters come in many different shapes and sizes. So yes, don't be intimidated. Give it a try. You'll soon find out if it's for you or not, because you'll experience that rush and that pleasure, at least after a while. Or like John,
interestingly enough, it just to smoothly segue to show I am also in the smoothly segueing class. The Legendary Kingdoms, the thing I like about LK is that because you play a group of 4 characters, even though it is designed to be a solo game book that you can definitely play on your own, and that's the audience that it's aimed at. Equally, we found people playtesting where either one person has taken the role of GM, i.e. narrator, and 4 other people have taken each of the characters, and as a result you can run your own adventure. And if you are like me, would love to be a GM but not necessarily fully confident that you can just absorb Pathfinder or absorb 5th edition and then off you go, give LK a go, because it allows you to take people through an adventure. You present them with a series of decisions. As a group, they can then make their own mind up as to where they want to go, and then you can direct them through. Or if you're not wanting to have a GM, you can take it in turns as the 4 players to read the next section and adventure that way. And that's what I like about the choose your own adventure style books that have this group aspect. And with the way Oliver's written this book, it remembers what you've done, so you don't go back and have to kill the same troll under the same bridge or the same dragon in the same mine. Don't want to give too much away, but yeah, it's certainly something that the new budding and aspiring GM should give a go as a nice segue between being a PC and then being a fully fledged GM.
So real quick, don't forget everyone to like the video. Whatever we do here is that whenever we get a certain number of likes, we always make our guests do something silly. So when we have, I think, 25 likes for this one, because it is an August day, and August is it's usually a little quieter. We get 25 likes, we make Oliver and John do something. We'll see. Who knows? We always come up with something on the fly, and then usually we get dragged into it as well. And then it backfires. Anyhow, and then if you want to join, you can join as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And I see the likes going up. So you have written, or Oliver wrote, and this started out first, you have Legendary Adventures, and this is the Valley of Bones, and this is the first one that is the fighting fantasy type choose your own adventure. But then it looks like you're going to have 6 of these total, and then you have the crown and tower, which is gigantic. I mean, look at it. It's like you can see the difference. It's like
it's a bit bigger. Yeah,
it's a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And Oliver, you do these yourself.
Yeah.
And I know there's software out there. I actually researched this back in the day because I was thinking of doing this like 10, 15 years ago. And I know there is software out there that will help you design these choose your own adventures that will keep track of everything. But you don't use that, right? You do this all in your head?
Yeah.
You're insane.
Well, I say it's all in my head. Like everything, there's preparation and there are notes and so forth. So Legendary Kingdoms, just so that people know what it is, because John gave a brief overview, but Legendary Kingdoms, it's a game book, so it's like Fight Fancy and Choose Your Own Adventure, but it is a sandbox game book world. I'm not the first person to come up with this concept. It was originally done by Dave Morris and Jamie Thompson back in the 90s, and they produced something called the Fabled Lands, which every single book is a different area of the country. They produced 6 books. They intended to do 12, but life got in the way, and they didn't manage to make them all. And that likewise was a sandbox, and it was my favorite game book for ages and ages because of its raw imagination and the intricacy with which the books talked to one another, which is to say that there are areas in one book which you can't access without going to another book, and there are kind of like meta plots and myths that exist over the top of the books, which you can only unpick by going to different areas of the world. This is the first time this was really done. The closest before that would be the Sorcery books by Steve Jackson, which were basically, that was the Lord of the Rings of the Choose Your Own Adventure world, where you have what seems like a fairly straightforward task. You have to recover the crown of kings from an evil archmage who lives in a town called Mampang. But you begin in one bottom corner of the map, and it's 4 books before you reach the archmage at the end. And along the way, you're increasing your power and knowledge of sorcery. You're making friends and enemies and defeating all kinds of foes and just exploring in a very imaginative kind of strange, kind of semi-Southeast Asian and semi-European world. It was very interesting. But my intention was to take both of those ideas and kind of move it into the future and answer some of the things that I thought, not that they could have done better because it wasn't their intention to do this, but to make the world kind of like more rounded, and it to be more of a bigger adventure with a kind of firmer climax. So Legendary Kingdoms, it's the same. It's a sandbox adventure world. In this case, it's a party-based game book. So much like Dungeons and Dragons, you have 4 characters. Your characters, you can choose from either a selection of 6 pre-made characters at the front of the book, or you can make your own. But the advantage of picking the pre-made characters is that they all have plots that go on in the books. So because every book is a different area of the world. So the Valley of Bones is like a Conan the Barbarian style desert world, and book 2 is like medieval Europe. Every character that you can pick from comes from one of those parts of the world, and that's their kind of like their origin land and so forth. So they're all tied into the world itself, and the characters talk to each other. They can fall in love with each other. They can have rivalries. They can split up from each other and all those sorts of things. I kind of wanted a bit of a Baldur's Gate romance system sort of going on in the background, but it was largely so that the characters themselves and their experiences would draw you into what the world was like to live in, and to create that kind of, RPG sense. The idea is that, when you complete one book, or even if you don't complete it, just at any time, you can sail off the edge of the map and you go to a different book, and there you have a different land and experience. And each of the areas, each of the legendary kingdoms themselves are all very different. It's all very separate. So you're not adventuring in the same place, again and again. So that's the basic idea of what Legendary Kingdoms does. And one of the things that I wanted to accomplish was, yes, this idea of character, because I think often role-playing game books slightly miss out on that aspect, but when they do it, it's always great fun. And I remember a Fight Fancy book called Death Trap Dungeon, which you would think would be just about a big dungeon. But my favorite bit is when you bump into this barbarian called Throm, and the two of you have, it's like only 14 sections, but the two of you get on and you fight monsters together and you solve traps together. And if you stuff up, then Throm will roll his eyeballs, and sometimes he'll take a hit for you and so forward. And just that little bit of characterization lifted the book. And then, Throm at some point disappears, and, it's just you again. And it's somehow not quite as good. So I wanted to capture that sense of character. The other thing that I wanted to do was, the Fabled Lands is deliberately designed to be, there's a whole bunch of quests and you just do what you like. And you can't do that with Legendary Kingdoms, but the quests in it are much more personal. Every book has what I'd call a main quest. So in book one, for instance, there is a queen who you can restore to power, and you can help her to conquer the other city-states and, restore the land to a sense of peace and harmony. And then in book two, there's a rivalry between two noble houses who are trying to get the, one up on each other. So there's a book plot. There's a character plot. So if you chose a character from that world, so say in book one, you chose Akira, who is a sword saint from the city of Chalice, you can resolve his kind of personal quest in that book. So Akira always wanted to be a Kensai, a sword saint, but his father and his grandfather all messed up on the trials and didn't succeed. So you can try and kind of, Tom Cruise, like bury the ghost of your father, and succeed where they failed, or not succeed. You can also not succeed. Sir Jessica Dane, who is a character in book two, can become a baroness. For instance, she can inherit a barony, and that's in book two, and you can pursue that quest as well.
So how do you organize all this? Because that's my question. Because basically you are a GM writing every aspect of the adventure in a book. It's basically like, here's the adventure, here's how you can run the adventure, but here's all the different outcomes of the adventure. It's like, it is fascinating in the sense that you write every aspect of it, and all the branching. So how did you organize all this and figure this all out? Because it's like, this would definitely obviously be useful for GMs. I don't think GMs ever go more than one or two sessions past. At least that's when I'm a forever GM, and I just ran a session last night, and I literally put in enough monsters and enough plot for the next 3 or 4 sessions, and that's it. That's as far as I go.
That's a very sensible way of doing it. I think part of it is about seizing control as the games master. There's the paths not taken. So often when you do Dungeons and Dragons, you will do a game, and your PCs most of the time will take the most obvious path. And you, just in case, have prepared this other path. And the problem is that secretly, the second path that you created was more interesting than the first. And you don't realize that until after the players have gone down the obvious route. And then you think, I kind of wish they did the other one. I was actually more interested in that alternative branch. So a lot of that is, you have to remember that with many of these campaigns, they are campaigns I've played before in the past. So the Valley of Bones is a campaign I did 22 years ago, and was played to death, and I've played it with others subsequently. But I was always, in my free time planning, what if this happens? What if that happens? How does this work? And I get to the table, one set of choices is made. There's something quite pleasing about showing what those other choices are. And there's something quite nice as a player to go back, just as you did, Mark, to go back and go, well, what if I made the other choice? What different things would happen? And this is a crucial thing with Legendary Kingdoms. Choices have weight. and they have long permanent consequences. If a character is, if you help a character in one book, in book one, you might bump into them in book 3. If you have enraged the Patriarch of Curses and you've gone back to, a barbarian city-state, the next time you're wandering around, assassins might turn up and get you. They won't do that if, you don't piss off the Patriarch. There's these little things. I mean, there's larger examples, but I don't want to spoil them. But there's larger and sometimes very profound examples where the entire nature of the game is changed because you've made one decision, and that carries with you throughout the books. And this is something it's very pleasurable for a games master to think about, because most of the time you don't get that opportunity. You've just got one track you can follow. Here it's that pleasure of it's just one adventure, but really it's many, and it's many paths, and you're working on them all at the same time. In terms of how I physically organize it, it goes very roughly like this. Every book has, all the books themselves have got a Bible where I am writing the kind of, rules of the world and the important things that are happening. So to do a teeny tiny spoiler, but just to show what I mean, in book 4, there is a corrupt king who the main quest is to try and unseat him. The king is horribly corrupt. He needs to be removed for the good of the kingdom. Now, I knew about that main plot before I started writing book 1. I created the main plots of each book. So what I did is that in every single book in Legendary Kingdoms, I have to make sure that I include at least one piece of incriminating evidence for the King of Goldwell, for King Goldwell, so that when you're exploring the land and you're doing that quest for the king, you're coming across little examples of his corruption as you go, just kind of organically. You don't suddenly turn up in book 4 and, oh, the king's corrupt, is he? Oh, I never knew that. It seems like something I should have known before. It's something, your players probably have already discovered. And in the course of their adventures, they're picking up these little bits of evidence as they go, so that if your players are being really, really thorough, they've got a whole tranche of starting evidence which will make their adventure in book 4 a bit easier. And this is a way that it's not really cheating. I've just decided the plot for book 4 in advance, and I'm seeding the world with bits that are useful for it. There are many examples, and I won't give them away, but this is how the book is structured. You know what the 6 basic plots of your books are going to be. You can fill in little bits in each book, and they should just be tasters, because every book needs to be able to stand by itself. If a book doesn't stand by itself, it feels odd, it feels weird, it feels unsatisfying. And I don't know what order people will play Legendary Kingdoms. But if you see the world with all these little things and these connections, and you know what the main plot points are, you know what the main character points are, so that if something significant happens in a book, but and a character has a change of mind, say a romance is going extremely well between 2 characters, and they've ended up in a very romantic area, then that in book 3, you can have the romantic culmination of that there, and that in book 5 you can have it for this other group of characters. So it's really just about, it's the opposite of what they did with the Star Wars sequels. You write the plot first of all, so you know exactly what's going to happen, and then you backfill it. You can backfill the details, and from that Bible, I can help. It helps to populate the world and fill in those various missing pieces. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's one of the main routes. The other is that when I'm writing the books, I create them in every part of the book is in its own bespoke section. So book 1 has a big desert city called Saltdad, and Saltdad, everything that happens in Saltdad happens in I write in one section of the book, and it kind of sits there. And I won't give it a classic numerical code. I'll call it AC01 or AC17 or whatever, and everything I'll write just kind of chronologically as I go. and I won't be randomizing the numbers until the end of the book, and then kind of like splitting them up and scattering them apart. And that way, if I want to go back and add a section because there's something I've missed, or if I've had a good idea while I'm writing something else and I want to kind of fill that out, I can do it that way. But it is unfortunate, just largely like anything else. It is in my head when it comes right down to it. I'm just very taken with the story. I want other people to experience it, and I want to make sure there's a little bit of legacy. Just this idea of, if when I shuffle off the mortal coil, Legendary Kingdoms lies behind me, and people are still, having.
Not until you've finished writing the series.
Not until I've finished writing.
I know. I was thinking, I'm like, you better get hurry. Better get going.
But yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll finish it all. It should be one a year. So hopefully I'll live that long. But it's. But it is. I'm not saying this is my gift to the people or anything. It's nothing so lofty, but it is. This is an Oliver Hume role-playing game. This is how Oliver GMs. This is how it feels. Everyone can play in the game, and you can experience what it's like.
So I'm curious because you have 6 books, and the Pathfinder adventure paths, by the way, are always 6 books or 3 books, 6 or 3. So, but it's interesting. It's the same number. Do you have? And you said you already had book 4 outlined. So do you have book 5 and 6? Like, did you outline all the books in general?
Yes.
And so they're. So you have the stories, and so that way you can interconnect them and have them connect with each other.
That's right.
Wow.
And I think that's the unless you're doing the book sequentially. And it's just, that's the only way you can do it if you're going to go for a pure open world experience. You have to do it that way. I'm convinced it's the way that Morris and Jamie Thompson did it, for instance, because of, you have these obscure references to people like the Attacking and the High King and all these sorts of things that don't come in until many books later. So this isn't a unique skill which I possess, strangely. And I think, lots of fantasy writers do this. This isn't some weird power that I have. But it's people do look at it and they think that's impossible. You can't possibly keep it in your head. Yes and no, there are bits I forget, but all the important bits are written down. All the bits that,
you have 1,201 entries in Crown and Tower.
Yes,
so how do you play test this? Because if this is not on a computer, how do you make sure that you don't have branches that don't work?
Well, it happens.
I know it. I'm sure it does. That's why I'm like, how do you fix that? How do you find that?
It's playtesting ultimately. So I get everyone I can find to playtest the books, and normally I can find someone with a very special brain who just has this brutal desire to break my game. And this sounds like the world's most awful thing, but it is a gift.
Oh God, no. No.
It's such an important skill. And actually, this is the big difference between people who make it, I think, as game designers and those who don't. They like the people who break their systems, because
you can either make it or break it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it can be remade after it's broken. This is the point. You just need to know that this is happening. And I remember when I was doing my first role-playing game, there was a chap called Jack, and he was the Warhammer regional champion. So he was kind of, had a really strategic mind, a brilliant man in all sorts of ways, an absolute asshole, because at the end of every adventure that I did, he would point out all the things that he didn't like. And it'd say, I'm missing too much. Your spaceship combat is flabby. This gun is clearly better than that one. Why on earth would I ever buy anything other than this? You can break the game by just being an explorer, all these different things. And, at first it's enraging, because you think, you know what? You bloody make a role-playing game, mate. We'll see how well you do. And then, of course, when you calm down for a bit, you realize he probably has a point. And if he spots it, other people will too. And my job was every week to come back and get a battering from this man. As you know, I fixed the thing, and you know, there's a curtain nod, and if I fixed it wrong, he'll slam me. But invariably, he'll find something else until eventually he shut up. He was just starting to have fun, and the system worked. And it's originally grueling, but it doesn't even sting anymore. It's now a case of, it turns out that, you can kill the king and he's alive again in this section. That's fine. I'll fix that. And,
Wow.
I don't take it personally anymore. It's all about the product and the, and the completion. It's for the good of the game.
That
and I can. Yeah.
I was going to say, does that sound familiar, Mark?
Yes.
I actually think it's a testament to as Oliver mentioned, successful writers are those who produce something amazing, but then put it out for real criticism, take on that real criticism, and then make it better. I remember with Oliver, he had a particular combat system for spaceship combat, because this was the Elite Dangerous role-playing game that we had officially licensed from the people who made the Elite Dangerous MMO, Frontier Developments. And he had a spaceship combat system that was worked out, and a combat system for the SRVs, the like the surface buggies, and both were fantastic, but both had significant flaws. And it was only by playtesting, tearing apart, taking criticism, and then realizing that actually what you needed to do with both of these systems is tear them up, put them in the bin, and start from scratch.
Wow.
Were we able to make the game that is published and proving successful now? And that is because you don't get a writer who sits there in splendid isolation and says, no, I've written it, it's a fantastic system and I am going to stick with it. You really need to know that there are going to be people out there who will break your game, and you need to celebrate that and enjoy that pain.
And it goes through two levels. I mean, with Spidermind, what we do, especially when we did the Kickstarter, when we released the PDF of book 2 before we printed the books, that went out in the world beforehand, and we before it was sent to the printers, and we said to people, actually, if you find any errors with it, do let us know. We won't, it's nothing bad, and we will change them. And Kickstarter, as you probably know, can be an acerbic platform, and people will say, this bit doesn't work. You're obviously an idiot, and anyone could have spotted that this doesn't function, and all that kind of stuff. And you take that on the chin, you go, right, okay, it's changed, it's back out there again, and eventually, it stops. I mean, most people were lovely, actually. I mean, I say that, most people who fed back were great, and they say, I think you missed this, I think you missed that. And it's, the real challenge to your ego is when someone says you're an absolute idiot because you've made this one mistake. That's definitely not a mistake I would have made. You're a complete imbecile. And you have to say, well, thank you very much for that. I'll change that, round, and I'll read your 6-book epic, fancy game book system.
Right. That's always.
But it comes up.
That's the easiest retort. Is like, oh, okay. Whenever, you're like, okay, that sounds great. I want to see your books. Right. Let me see your books, and then we'll criticize yours when you publish your books.
There's in anything like this, it's like a Bethesda game, maybe slightly less buggy, but it's like that kind of thing. Anything of really high ambition, there are little, kind of little errors, but people generally accept it for the nature of the work that it is, the scale of the ambition that it is.
And that's the thing that we're always keen to stress, both with the products that we've developed as well as with the books and the games that we make. The reason we go to Kickstarter is for the actual reason Kickstarter was first muted as an idea. And that is to come up with something we'd like to create, suggest it as an end result, and then raise funds to make that thing possible. It's not this whole idea that we've already made the game, we've play tested it, we've got it, it's ready to go. It's just, we'll shove it up on Kickstarter as a means of doing a little bit of publicized pre-order. We actually make the game with the backers. And I know it sounds a bit hackneyed and a bit old-fashioned and a bit like no one does that anymore.
Not at all.
Actually, we do, because we've even in this latest Kickstarter that we launched for book 3, we've even got some of the people who've been very active on the comments get involved in helping us playtest.
Yeah.
Not because we've gone, all right then, put your money where your mouth is. We've actually approached these people and said, you're passionate for this book. Can you help us by playtesting it? Because the more eyes we get on this book, the better it becomes. And these people have been brilliant. And now we've got lots of phenomenal playtesters.
Yeah.
You can never have too many, and the book will only get better the more assistance we get.
Well, John,
it's hilarious because all the things that you two are saying is like, it's very unusual that we do this. It's like, we do it too for
I was about to say, John, that's why I think you and I got along so well. We literally do the exact same methodology that you do. Like we are exactly the same.
PDFs, giving them out to the people first, so that they can find errors in the print run. There are not that many companies that do that. Actually, most of the time they put the PDF together with the print on the same day.
I can understand why you don't want to open yourself up to criticism. As Kickstarter can be a service, as Oliver's already said, because it can just on the wrong day when you're really
you're right.
You read something and you just think, do you know what? The next time we're just going to release it. We're just going to advertise on Facebook and stuff it. But you have to calm yourself down. Roll backpedal from that particular comment, because first of all, comments are really difficult to assess when you're reading them for whether that person is the same as you, and is that said in a sarcastic tone, or is it actually a genuine comment? You can always misinterpret it. Secondly, I now take the most active criticism as being because that person wants the product to be better, because they actually care about it. And okay, some people can be hugely unforgiving, and of course you do feel like going, great, so when your 6-book tomes come out, we'll take a look at those too and remember how utterly unforgivingly rude you've been. But in most cases, people are just supremely passionate about it.
So after
it's that enthusiasm that we have to tap into, and that's why we will, at the moment, I think our intentions are to have a Kickstarter, but with every one of these books. We could supposedly privately publish it to a small audience and off we go, but there's something special about getting people involved in something, getting them to give us their opinions, for good or for ill, and getting people to help fine-tune a project. And that's kind of why I like Kickstarter as an option, especially for this game book series.
Yeah, and I think after this session we'll have a little therapy session where we can talk about all of our feelings and how people are mean.
Look,
Mark has a Discord.
I've been a game designer on Paizo.com forums and other places for like a top tabletop role-playing game, and I feel like at least our Kickstarter is much nicer than that.
Oh God, and not only that, Mark can go to a Reddit channel 24/7 that does nothing but talk about Pathfinder, both good and the bad, whenever he wants. It's all stuff that he probably touched or had a hand in touching. So it's I think it's got to be tough to be you, Mark. Or Mark is the most bulletproof person on earth, because you have access to that whenever you want.
It's kind of like, people who live in an area where something unusual or even like bad or negative happens, you become desensitized to those kind of situations. And so I have seen things that go up to the level of like death threats or like horrifically terrible slurs being thrown at game designers. I mean, not a lot of times, but sometimes. And so like other criticism for me is like, okay, it's not that. So like you said, John, I try to read everything in the best possible light that it could be read in. And that does that mean I'm taken a fool of sometimes, because no, they did mean it as an insult, sure, but it's better for my mental health anyway. And I do agree with you that the people who literally you see that they've written like enough words of vitriolic complaints about your game that, like, if they were a paid freelancer for your game on paid for all of those words of complaint, you would have paid them like tens of thousands of dollars, because they've spent like years of their entire life complaining about your game. That, like you said, that means they really actually are super passionate about it. Like, nobody does, even if they never say anything good ever, and they don't mention that they're playing it and that it's a big part of their life, you're not going to spend that much of your time complaining about it unless it is. So just like the internet is a place where that allows people to say whatever they're going to say. And we are more motivated to speak out when we don't like something or we want something to change, because that gives the motivation. It gives the sort of the call to action is get it changed or fix it. And so all the people often who like something, they don't have that call to action, and they even worry, like, is this just going to seem like I'm just like brown nosing to the authors, and they're going to think that I'm silly if I post this. And authors really want you to post positive things, and it's very important for our psyche and our emotional well-being, but people don't think of it that way. And it's more of a, like, they either don't think about it or they worry that they shouldn't. Whereas if it's bad, or if you have a problem with it, kind of, I think everyone agrees that you have a right to express that, maybe not as impolitely as some people do. And so that's how it always winds up being, I think, like, kind of inundated with negativity, no matter how positive.
But it's easy to see, it's easy to consider something being inundated with negativity. But we when we launched the Dragon Eye Dice campaign, we made a decision mid-campaign to give away a free gift that we were giving away for people who'd backed within the first 48 hours. We then moved over to actually give it away to everybody. What we didn't explain at the time is that nearly 70% of people backed in the first 2 days. And so we're talking about a large number of people. It actually would have cost more money to have then singled out the nearly 30% who weren't going to get this free gift. Instead, we just opened it up to everybody. But the amount of anger that came out then sort of turned the comments for the next couple of days into mainly anger. But if you actually do the maths and you count how many different people there were a couple of people who were, as you mentioned, Mark, writing reams and reams and reams, thousands of pounds worth of paid work. But we did the maths, and there were 24 people, and we had a Kickstarter that was backed by about 8,200 or something backers in total, and there were 24 people who were voicing their dissatisfaction in degrees. It wasn't everybody who was superbly upset. One guy said, "Please don't ever go to Essen," as a threat, because Essen being the games fair in Germany, because if we went to commit some act against us or whatever. But that was one person.
It's rough for a dice campaign, isn't it?
Exactly, and that was and that was like, wow. But 24 people as a percentage of 8,200 is minute. And yes, we did get people saying, "Oh my God, your comments have exploded. Everybody really hates this idea." But that's the internet. If a few people write negative comments, then people use the term everybody.
Right.
Or the entire campaign is falling apart, or everybody's being negative. No, 99.9% of people are getting on with their day job, concerning themselves about more important things, and every so often looking back at the Kickstarter and breezing through the latest update. And as long as they know they're going to get their thing by the end of the 12 months, 18 months or whatever, then they're perfectly happy.
Well,
and so I now take that view,
Mhm.
and when I look at people who get passionate about it, I will respond to that passion, but I will treat it like it is the 0.0001% that it actually is. And that is, listen to it, answer it, engage with it, but it won't necessarily cause the campaign to make a U-turn or to suddenly go in a different direction, because it isn't everybody. It isn't the whole of the internet. It's not the whole of the Western world. It's just a small group of people who feel very passionate about it. And I think that sounds to me like the best way creators of crowdfunding campaigns can deal with it. As I said, don't treat them like they're insignificant, except for the fact that they might not necessarily be the majority. And therefore, you always have to consider that when you're making decisions reacting against those sort of explosions.
Well, this has turned into a very weird session. Went from role-playing games to don't take it personally. The internet is full of trolls. Speaking of Kickstarter and fun things, we are still doing our Kickstarter. The Battle Zoo Eldamon, Battle Zoo Bestiary, Strange and Unusual, Year of Monsters. And we are doing exactly what you described, John, is that because Battle Zoo Bestiary has 150 monsters, and almost all of them are created via contest, via people who literally voted on them, both publicly and privately. So we literally crowdsource them so that these monsters come out awesome. Year of Monsters is the ancestries being written by Mark, which are weird monsters like mimics and stuff. And we've already started to ask for feedback from, we have a kind of a trusted source of people, and they're giving us feedback. And I know after this call, Mark's going to be literally implementing some of that feedback in some of these ancestries. And then we have a secondary group of playtesters that we'll give it to, because we're trying to get it. And then on top of that, when we release the ancestries, we're going to do meetings with people after it's public, and then they can give us feedback, and we're going to do YouTube sessions, because then we're doing a compiled book, and then the compiled book will have feedback from that. So we're doing 3 rounds of feedback to make sure that these monsters are as cool as possible. So we really embrace that idea that it takes a village and that it's your game. And that's sort of our central theme at Roll for Combat, is that we build these together.
Isn't it awesome when people can say, yeah, my creation is in this book, because it just gets people significantly. That's the point, really, of a crowdfunding campaign. I know you can't always invite every single backer to help create something. I understand to a certain extent there does need to be a captain of the vessel, but I just love the fact that you got people to upvote different monsters and choose what goes into the book. I think it's a genius little idea.
Thanks.
So I would approve that our digression that we made about the comments is actually connected to our main topic.
Mark
somehow.
Gamified it. All right, here, how did you gamify it?
Here we go. So John, you were talking about like it's a very small number of people and whether you should change the ship based on that, right? And it reminded me of one of the Choose Your Own Adventure books I had as a kid. There's some dinosaurs, and they really want you to come play with them. And if you do, they turn out to be evil moles that kill you. And if you don't, they turn out to be dinosaurs, and they're very sad. And and they were not evil moles. And those are the only options in that Choose Your Own Adventure book. And it made me think about the fact that it made me think about the fact that if you did turn the ship for those 24 people, you'd find 24 new people who liked the first way that you had done things, and now are going to be making the same comments, and put you in that no-win situation, like with the moles who were disguising themselves as dinosaurs. And it made me think about like how we can learn a lesson for tabletop RPG game design to not make our players frustrated from that bad Choose Your Own Adventure book that I played.
I must say, I don't like, just a pet peeve, but I noticed this about the Choose Your Own Adventure books. Every so often, they wouldn't have a consistent narrative. That is a classic example where they're either mole monsters
they're all over
or
the
they're
place.
dinosaurs, but they can't be both. Don't guilt trip me.
Yeah.
You know, when I've made the right decision, and
you're right, Mark.
Now
You
let's be
can't,
dinosaurs.
yeah,
Fine.
you can't annoy the person who you're wanting to consume your story and feel the same passion in reading it that you have had in writing it. You can't then go and irritate them by making these completely inconsistent rules, because it's just going to piss people off, and they're just going to go whatever and throw the thing away, and it's going to be
Well, actually,
Choose Your Own Adventure got away with it, didn't it? Because it was the only game in town, and they're also it was a little bit different. They weren't after verisimilitude so much. It was a lot of them were quite fairy tale in a way, in a sense that they were almost just so. In a sense where you had to do the right thing on the basis of its own virtue. It's didactic storytelling. That's what we call
actually.
it.
So I found it. There's actually a lot of articles on this. There is, in fact, on Gizmodo they wrote, "Remember inside UFO 5440, the unwinnable Choose Your Own Adventure." And this came out. I remember this one. This came out in 1982. It was a 12th book, and back then I had every one, and so I was 12 years old. And inside UFO 5440, you were trying to get to Utopia, and you actually, the story begins, this is how 80s it is, on the Concorde flying from New York to London. How that's so funny.
Wow.
And you can never get to Utopia ever, and a lot of the things are bad, but if you go to page 101, not only is it this gorgeous 2-page spread with with an amazing picture showing Utopia, there's no way to get to it. The only way you can get to it is to cheat and thumb to it and choose it. You actually have to choose it. And I did exactly what you did, Mark. Like, what I would do is I would keep my finger in the book, go to the section, go back, and just keep going back and forth. And then I'm like, there's no way to do it. Like, I did every path possible. And this is how memorable it was. I remember sitting in the library in my middle school doing this. To this day I still remember finding it, going, how did I find, like, it's like, this is the only way, like, doing the math.
A gimmick, though.
But it worked.
That Utopia is unreachable, whereas for the one I was talking about is the no-win situation, because they actually literally changed what was true about the situation to make it to the whatever.
Oh, I know. But the point is that they did do shenanigans. The point is that there are shenanigans, but this is still talked about to this day. And there's a whole Wikipedia article on this one book about this.
Wow. No one wrote a Wikipedia article about the moles and the dinosaurs.
No. And by the way, Cheese of Ages did have a comment, super fan. Here's a positive comment from Mark. Everything in the past 7 years in tabletop role-playing games I've deeply resonated with, that you either wrote or had a major part in, Mark. So you have a big fan in Cheese of Ages.
Yeah, there's a comment from Mark underneath that said, "Thank you so much."
There you go.
Good old Mark.
There you go. So Mark did see it, but you did see. So how many of those pages do you have in your book, Oliver, that I can only get to by thumbing to, that cheat? Do you have any cheats?
That's quite a question, because there are some that you
really
can't get to conventionally. Yes.
Wow, that was a joke, but I didn't realize the real answer was coming.
Do they require another books to get to that book?
Okay, so this is a small diversion. It's not a diversion, it's the main topic. One of the things about Fabled Lands that I wanted to change was that if you play Fabled Lands, you got to book 6. You eventually get to this point where you were unbeatable and your stats were super high. Every challenge could be easily defeated and so forth. And this is a common thing that happens actually in Dungeons and Dragons and most tabletop role-playing games. Once you start cusping 14th level, the game, it's so impossible for the monsters to win because the players have access to so many resources. There's that kind of golden period of 5th to 14th, I think, which
except in Pathfinder 2nd edition, we fixed it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, except in Pathfinder 2nd edition, apparently. But the one of the things that I wanted to do was there needed to be a last hurrah for the game. So when you've done all the books, I didn't want there to be this descendo of oh, well, I've completed the final book plot in book 6. So I suppose I'll just have to stop. So I've put in a secret mega quest. It's not that secret because I tell everyone there's a secret mega quest. I just don't tell them what it is, which essentially it's a bit of a classic world-saving mega quest. Most of the quests are not about saving the world because that's a bit hackneyed. But after you've played through 6 books, each of which takes you 20 to 30 hours to complete, and you've just done book 6, you jolly well deserve a world-saving, kind of finale. So there is that in the book. And you get to do effectively a final lap where you can go to the other books and find there are secret places which you can access in the original books which aren't connected by conventional turn to page whatever. Instead, there is a secret system whereby you can get to it. And you can only do that when you've activated the mega plot at the end of the book. So there's, all these little areas, and they're all super hard. They're all pitched from mega powerful characters. And so you can really, really try your final resources there. They're completely gloves off. Mostly, Legendary Kingdoms can be fairly tricky. I think book 1 is easier, book 2 is harder. But it's a real test. This is where you want, all of your equipment to be the best as possible. You want to have scoured all the books for all the edges you can get, and then you do the final mega quest, which will take you through every single one of the books and eventually culminate in this grand, epic final battle. And so, yes, there are sections in the game books, and people have started to spot it, and they, bless them, someone highlighted it as an error, and they said, did you know that in reference 480 or whatever, that there's not actually a route to get there. I've been through the document and there's no link to it, so you've obviously got a broken link there. And I had to write back, and unfortunately it was a public comment.
No.
And I said there is a way to get there also.
No.
And because there's not much more you can do. I think that clever people will discover what that mechanism is before I reveal it in book 4.
It's not utopia where you absolutely can't get to it.
Right.
That's it. It is in fact something that by the time you start to pick up the patterns, you will then be able to figure it out and suss it out. And actually, going back to what Oliver said, that's something that's great about the book. The absolute impossibility of this book, and the most frustrating thing about it is, as Oliver said, you are not safe. You really are not safe. It's one of those books where open it, play it, and be prepared to die. And
wow, thanks.
I say this in the nicest possible way because I love playing and keeping my finger in the last decision and whatever, but there are times when you can make a decision and you clearly make the wrong decision, and it is unforgiving in that way. Do people like it? Yes. In the vast majority of people love it because it really challenges you, and you've got to make a decision. Do I go down there and attack that thing? No, because I don't think I'm ready for that yet. So you can head off, go do other things, collect a few more weapons, and then come back and really challenge, which is what D&D does all the time. I remember Oliver setting us a challenge when I played my first campaign with him, where he said, blah, 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 we get around this dungeon and we get to this room and it's just full of baddies, and we take a little peek around the corner and the rogue has a sneaky peek and goes, right, there's 15 major enemies in there, la, la, la. Do we want to do it? And we said, no, we'll clear off and we'll go and do something safe, and then we'll come back and it's all of that, because it was lovely to launch the Kickstarter for book 2, and we asked Becca Scott, who originally people will remember from Geek and Sundry. She's now got her own channel set up, and she does this fantastic playthrough with 3 of her friends. But the playthrough she did live ended up with a total party kill. Because they decided to go into a house to rescue some kids, a burning building to rescue some kids, and it went wrong.
That is. I just don't mean to interrupt you. I didn't even think about this. You could totally do this, because I have 2 actual plays on our channel that we've been running for like 5 years. You could definitely run this as an actual play. You have each person play a character. You have one person as GM reading it, and then everyone gets to do the roles.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Exactly
Ooh, now I'm excited. I think that would be a fun way to play this. I never thought of that.
It's not that it's designed that way, but it is designed to be run that way.
Right.
We've had families. There's a family who was playtesting. It wasn't. I don't think Oliver had designed it for the entire family to play test, but it just happens to be that there's a GM and 4 other people sat around the table playing their favorite characters. And Becca had these buddies come and do it, and thankfully they've also played through book 3 where they had a much more successful time.
They survived.
They survived. But you've got to treat it carefully. Like every well-written D&D adventure, you don't want the GM to just be a complete unrelenting bastard and kill everybody off after 3 or 4 games and celebrate the fact that he's made it super hard or she's made it super hard. But instead, what you really want is to know that every decision actually counts. Right. You've got to be careful because you can't bite off more than you can chew, because this book will...
It's about consequences. I think what it is that people don't feel bad if they sort of feel they've made a mistake. If they look at it and they go, I was being a punk when that happened, and so I kind of deserve what I got, then they don't feel bad about being defeated or killed, as it were. We were being silly there. Whereas I think it's when it's a case of you're in a dungeon, you go left or right, and you go left, and suddenly you die. You fall down a pit and everyone's killed. That people hate.
No, this is actually giving me a very, very good idea, Mark. I think we should put together a group. We got like Derek and No Nat as players. Maybe you can even, and maybe you can GM it. This is actually very interesting. I would love to run through this as an adventure. And these
it sounds like fun.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
What are the suggested rules?
I've never played a game like that.
What are the suggested rules on rollbacks if everybody
really
dies?
cool.
If it's that unforgiving and you spend 20 to 30 hours per book, and you
well, that's, I think, 20, 30 hours.
On rolling back and putting your finger in various places and doing a recursion.
Yes, I expect that to happen because that's how everyone plays game books. I've also designed it so that when you're on your 3rd playthrough and you're thinking, can I beat this game book honestly? You've got a decent challenge, and because you're prepared and you kind of know what's coming, well, you think you do, because there's 6 books of this stuff and it changes according to what you've done. But when you got that preparation, it's a case of, no, I'm going to do this without cheating this time and see if I can do it. And it allows another way to play. And so the idea is that if you alter your characters, what happens in the game changes. If you just create your own characters, what happens in the game changes. You make different decisions, what happens in the game changes. So it's got a lot of replay value is the idea. And eventually, just like I periodically play the sorcery books, and I try to do it on minimum stats. So I give myself a skill of 5 and a stamina of 14 and almost no luck, and can I do it? Mostly I can't, but I did do it once, and I was very, very chuffed. It's possible. It can be done. There's just this one bit in book 2 with this race, which it's just luck whether you get through that or not.
The interesting thing for me is I don't consider it cheating in a regular choose your own adventure book to just go back and see everything, because I just want to see everything. But I would in a book like this if there was roll this check to defeat this dragon and I lost, and I was like, well, let's roll that back. I'll roll it again. Oh, I lost. Oh, I'll roll that back and roll it again. Oh, I lost. Oh, I'll roll that back and roll. Oh, I won. I beat the dragon. I would consider that to be cheating.
Right.
I would not consider it to be cheating
to check
all the paths and just read everything, because I'm just reading everything and being completionist.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think there's a wrong way to play it, because if you play Oblivion or Skyrim, and we use quick saves there. Oh no, I've been killed. Are you starting again from the beginning?
Save scrubbing.
Are you hell? No. You're reloading. You're save scumming. You're going back. Yeah. That's how you want to play. Have you ever played
Sleeping Gods, the board game?
No.
Oh, okay. So after this interview, go and look up Sleeping Gods, because Sleeping Gods is a choose your own adventure board game.
I've played a few of them.
This one is very, very popular. It actually sold out at Gen Con last year. It was so popular. It literally is choose your own adventure, because what happens is that you start off and it's very hard too. It's like extremely hard. You have different characters. There's actually, I think, 9 characters, and everyone has to play all the characters. So you might play 2 or 3 or 4 characters at a time. And then there's a captain that rotates around. And then you have different skill challenges, and each character can do the different skill challenges. But it is choose your adventure, because you go to an area, and then depending on the results of the skill challenge or items that you picked up, it changes. But it is an actual book, and it's choose your own adventure. But, and if you read the description, everyone describes this choose your own adventure with a board game. But it's Cthulhu-esque, and you can replay it, because each time you play it, you do unlock permanent unlocks. So then if you play it a second time, then it might be a little easier, and third time and so forth. So it's an interesting design space. And there's not a lot of people I would say you might want to check it out because it can help you. That might help you because you write these for a living. So it's very similar.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Kingdom of the Gods? Was that? Or
It's called Sleeping Gods. Yes.
Okay.
Sleeping Gods. Yeah.
Okay, no, I'll look out for it. I have played some board games with choose your own adventure elements.
Right. There's been a lot. There's a lot.
There's
a lot.
Yeah.
There's like Tales of the Arabian Nights is a famous one that is nearly entire choose your own adventure. And I've talked to other game designers about it where they're like, it's entirely random. And it's more of a choose your own adventure than a game. And I was like, I thought it was random too, but I've won a high enough percentage of them, even though I don't know how, that it seems like it's not just chance.
Something's going on.
By role playing my characters and trying to do what I think they would do, it seems that I'm winning more than chance, even though it seems like really, really arbitrary what happens to you. It's very random.
I mean, even the Asmodeus Fallout board game has choose your own adventure elements in it, which I was surprised about. It does feel like it's coming back. It's starting to make its way. And the first time I saw it returning was Destiny Quest. Is that Michael Ward? But it was, and again, you think my books are big. I mean, here's you can prop up the sofa with that. No problem. Great big chunky books. But again, a love letter to his past. There is something about, those of us who played them in the past, they've echoed through my head, and I've always wanted to do it. And I think that's the reason why I'm being critical. I just wanted to do my own one, which was everything about my gaming career. It's like Dungeons and Dragons, but it's stripped back, so it's more convenient for the book. But it is, you can get rid of all the frippery. It's still just there in the book. You can just play it with a piece of paper, some dice, and the book. You don't necessarily need all the other bits. I love playing Dungeons and Dragons with my maps and miniatures and all these sorts of things. My level up and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I never thought of it, but I would definitely I'd be very curious to play this. As you said, if 4 people are considered the standard, that each person plays a character, one person's the quote GM, and like talks through it, and then you play it. And I'm like, I've never thought of that.
I could cycle back to what John was talking about before on this, which is if it's in a choose your own adventure book, and mostly what you're doing is just kind of reading the book in a kind of dramatic tone, it's easier for you to set something up that without having to do the planned pre-scripting things that they would on a show like Critical Role, and still have like a show, and you don't need to use quite as many GMing skills for that.
I mean, it's fascinating the discussions that people will have. And 4 people is difficult because it means that you don't have an odd number, so you have to reach a general consensus. People will split into 2. I want to do this. I want to do this. Well, they can only do one. Except in some cases you can split the party, but that's fine by. But yeah, it's fascinating to hear those dynamics and where people, start developing their own superstitions of, well, no, I'm definitely not going there. No, I definitely don't.
Well, that's where you get like the diplomacy part or the werewolf. You get the social aspects of it in here where you got to convince each other, or you just do a roll-offs. That's what we do. It's like roll off, whoever wins. That's the way we go.
What was the
other side?
What was the superstition that young Teddy? This was the family that
yes.
What was his superstition that he just absolutely wouldn't do. If something happened, he wouldn't.
There was a 10-year-old player in this family, which I tested the book with because I wanted to test all kinds of different ages. It's not really designed for 10-year-olds. It's designed for more mature, but I just wanted to see. I mean, he loved it. But his decision was that if a reference ended in number 7, then it would be death. It would be doom and disaster, because he'd been kind of keeping track, and
so you have a 10% chance of dying.
Yes, absolutely.
It's because he was keeping track. I was wondering if he thought 7s and 4s were dying due to like the superstition in Japan where she and Chi-Chi have the
nothing so sophisticated or cultural.
Yeah, 10-year-old actually came up with that, Mark.
Homonym for death. No, I'm sure 10-year-olds in who like speak Japanese would already know about that superstition.
No, if we get if we get 3 more likes, we get something silly going on. Look at that, 3 more. Just need 3 more likes.
We're not very silly people, me and John. So
I don't know. You look pretty. You're even acting pretty silly.
Yeah.
We got 3 more. Look at that. We're so close. We're so close. We just need 3 more likes. Wow. Now I'm very excited. So when's the 3rd book come out? Third book.
So it depends how much I messed up. I've been writing today. I've been writing the section which was I put it out to playtest already. So lots of people have already played it, but I removed the section which was the secret bit, so that because I didn't do it last time and I kind of felt bad about it, and I thought I've ruined the game for some people. So for these playtesters, I removed the main secret part, and I thought I'll do that separately, and I'm writing that bit at the moment. Main things hold it back. It's art. So the art, we have wonderful artists working on it. The book covers are done by Claudio Piglia, and he is the concept artist for Game of Thrones, which is wonderful. We didn't know that when we first hired him.
Wow.
No.
I just thought it was a smacking picture, wonderful. But we discovered it later when we thought, well, we'll get book 2 designed. And I typed into his website, and there was, Dragonstone from Game of Thrones in front of it, and it's like, he earns quite a lot of money. Bless him. He doesn't charge half of what he could, because he knows that we're an itty bitty company. Bless him. So he's agreed to do all the books. He's also done it free. The internal art is done by a chap called Robin Smith, who is famous in Britain because he is the one of the main artists for Judge Dredd in the 1980s.
Wow.
So Judge Dredd was our classic kind of.
I know who Judge Dredd is.
You know Judge. Yeah, you guys probably know Judge Dredd.
Of course we know. Yeah.
It was 2000 AD was the countercultural comic, of the 70s and 80s, and it was much loved by anyone who had too much integrity to be a punk. But it was it was lovely to have him on, because he does such lovely drawings. It's both kind of 80s and it's more detailed. I mean, the stuff he does now, because he's later in his career, so he's not rushing these things. He's doing them far more detailed now.
Yeah, no, we're experienced geeks. I know you live right outside Mega City 1, so
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So it is. Bless you. I was very, very, very pleased to get both of them. Although I only knew about Robin Smith to begin with, and I lived in total ignorance of the Game of Thrones concept artist for far too many years. And we just discovered that later. But it was brilliant. They're both amazing artists. I can't remember.
Now that we've promised to fill the books full of all this art, of course, we can order it, and then we have to wait for artists to produce.
You know what? I'm in the same boat, man. I know this, but we know this all too well, because I have Jared Blando, who is one of the most famous cartographers probably in gaming, and his stuff is insane. But he is also doing Dragonlance and all this stuff for D&D, and he's very, very busy.
One of my map designers who I wanted, a lass called Victoria Berald, who's We tried to get her 2 years running to design our map, and for some reason she was constantly turning us down, saying, "Sorry, I don't have time." And I was starting to lose my temper a bit with her because I thought, she can't be that busy. How could she be busy all the time? She does the map art for Warhammer 40,000.
Oh, God.
So she's gonna be busy for the rest of her life.
We kind of forgave her that.
I forgave her when I saw that. I went, okay, all right, fair enough.
Okay.
Well, but now Blando's he's churning through them. He's churning through them, but we also have way more maps than anyone should have because we just did. I just did the maps for book 3, Mark, and she's like, "Oh, you have 19 maps," and I'm like, "Ugh."
Yeah.
Do I have 19 maps? Why do we have 19 maps?
Remember when Linda tried to use fewer maps and you told her, no, make more maps?
Yeah.
Well, I'm making them smaller.
That's a lot of maps.
I'm making them smaller. So that
and you asked for them to be bigger.
Well, bigger in terms of hexes, not physically large on the page, but we'll figure something out. So we got 27 likes, which means we got to figure something out. We usually have people do silly voices. If you so Oliver is a GM, John's a player. Do you guys play goblins or gnomes or anything silly? Or what is or how about this? Actually, Oliver, since these are your books, is there a character, a silly character that you like in Legendary Kingdoms that you can voice for us?
It's got a bit too much verisimilitude to have a silly character in there.
Oh, really? Wow.
Well, it's got funny bits in it, but
I don't know. But this art is like showing people like fighting to the death. It's not very silly. So
I feel like the real world has silly characters too. Like,
it does.
Steven is in the real world.
Hey, no one can be me.
I should have put him in. The closest we have to I think Robin snuck Boris Johnson into a crowd scene, didn't he?
He did.
Book 2. He was our prime minister until a few minutes ago.
I could not possibly even begin to do an impression of Boris Johnson.
I'll do Boris Johnson. No, I could do Goblin.
Goblin's good.
Do a Goblin Boris Johnson.
Okay, Goblin Boris Johnson.
Hey.
What do you think I am? I don't think I can do that.
Wow. No, I was just thinking if you had something popular or something in the book that you wanted to bring to life that people can then latch onto, because then when they read it, they'll always think of your voice. They're like, oh, there it is, Oliver. He's the one who made it. Who's these monkey men? Monkey men. I see monkey men in here.
Monkey men. One popular character is there's an ogre called Skullcracker. I do an ogre voice.
Okay.
Which is kind of oh gosh, it's really hard when you're put on the spot.
Yeah.
I need something to read.
Okay. Well, find something to read.
Find Skullcracker and chuck him in there.
Skullcracker. Right. In the meantime, get John to do something stupid, and I will look at Skullcracker.
I can do silly accents. When I'm a player character, I recently played a rogue, a ranger called Martin, and he had that, northern accent like Sean Bean.
Wow, that's good.
He used to like singing a lot, like his favourite musical was Lion King. So he'd sing Hakuna Matata. What a wonderful praise. So yeah, he'd do that. Or the Welsh dwarf. Because everybody plays dwarves with Scottish accents, but they're the mountain dwarves. And anybody who knows they're dwarves know that hill dwarves, in fact, come from the valleys. So their accent is very much Welsh.
No one could do a Welsh accent.
So that's what I end up doing when I'm playing my player characters. I do these silly voices just, to break it up a bit.
Oh my God, I figured out the missing ingredient, Mark. I need British people from the UK on my shows. It sounds so much better. It's like I'm like, wow, I'm actually like in a fantasy listening to you talk. When we do it, our British accents are terrible. Our Scottish accents are terrible.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's I love those YouTube videos, the Lad Bible ones, where they get a couple of stars from a sort of popular Netflix show, and then they do British or American, and they test whether you know whether an actor is in fact a Brit or an American.
Actors, yeah, because they have training. I'm talking about me and my buddies.
They have training.
We're talking about where like, oi, I'm gonna go drinking. Yes, it's like that.
You can tell if they have a bad British accent or like a American accent that is often done. That is like, I am talking like this, and you can tell that I'm really trying really hard, and I definitely sound American in this accent.
So
like, I don't know. Sometimes when it has that kind of a quality to me, I'm like, is that a British actor putting on it?
If I try an American, it would be kind of like the only American I know, which is the American where, you know, I would talk with a bit of an American accent like this because I don't know where I'd be coming from. But then if you're wanting
that's like a John Wayne accent.
Exactly. It's from nowhere because it's a Brit trying to do it.
Right.
Unless you're overdoing it. And when you overdo an accent, it's easier. Like,
you know what?
You know, where it comes from California, man, like this. It's pretty cool. It's like rad and everything. But that's not actually how people talk. It's just how people mimic the accent.
That's not completely true.
Okay. Or from the deep South where you got that y'all, you know, how you all doing? And I can do a bit of that, but I don't think I could have an entire conversation where I sound like I'm from the South, because people would just come up and punch me after a while because they think I'm taking the mickey.
You know, the funny thing is America's really big. Those accents are not as unfathomable as you might think. They're not common, but they're not uncommon either, believe it or not. Especially Southern's completely that's completely real. That California accent, California's a big state. There's a lot of people who talk like that. That's not uncommon, believe it or not.
I mean, yeah, it's not. You could sort of tell it's put on as an accent, but there are some people who sound like either of those two.
Talk like that.
Right.
Ollie Wright.
No one else is going to try to do a Goblin Boris Johnson.
Okay, go on.
I found the passage with Skullcracker the Ogre, who weirdly turned out to be a very popular character with people. Much to my disgrace, I didn't write him into any other books. It's too late now. So, but in tribute to him, I'll read this little section. I'm much better with the script. So, as you round the corner of the corridor, you come face to face with a hideous female ogre. She hefts her club to attack when she suddenly sees Skullcracker lollop into view. "Oi, what's going on here then?" she asks, confused. "I've gamed up with this lot," growls Skullcracker. "Can't be bothered to work for the Orcs anymore." "What am I supposed to do then?" snaps the female ogre. "What you like," shrugs Skullcracker. "It would be impertinent of me to suggest a course of action that influences your sense of agency one way or the other. And your smell." "Git," snaps the lady ogre. "I suppose I'll sod off myself then." "Good idea," grumbles Skullcracker. You are almost teary at the sad parting, but eventually Daisy the ogre shambles away.
Yay, we had two accents there.
Two accents.
There we go.
Yeah, that was good. By the way, we had Oily Wright give us £5. Says
Ollie Wright.
Ollie Wright. I know. Because I need my glasses. It's Ollie. I need my glasses. Which is really funny because his icon is literally Ollie. And I should be able to read that one, but he says
big and green.
I know. Yeah. One does not simply Huma Matata. Huma Matata. Yeah. That actually, I like that one that he sings by just saying it. It's like spoken word.
It actually that I'm stealing from an interview that two of the cast members from Game of Thrones gave.
Really?
It's Maisie. Is it Maisie Wright? I can't remember what her surname is. Maisie Smith. Sorry, and one of the other actresses were saying how they were taking the mickey out of who played Sansa. What was the actress who played Sansa? No. Anyway, her.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
But they were taking the mickey out of Sean Bean in the first series and doing his accent like this, and saying, "Wouldn't it be funny if they heard him singing Lion King?" So I thought, I love that. Thanks very much.
Or Sean Bean. You know,
I can't claim originality.
He
That's just
refuses
stealing
to play any characters that die anymore because he said everyone expects him to die now. So he refuses.
But he also refuses to play a character that isn't Sean Bean, and that I think is I have a lot of respect for. Sean Connery.
Yes.
I mean, Sean Connery was brilliant as a Russian submarine commander. Everybody else was nailing. All the other English actors on that set were nailing the Russian accent, and suddenly Sean.
He didn't bother. He didn't need to.
He's just, primeshtola. Is like, yeah, thanks, Sean. Thanks. That's all you've got to offer in Russian. And then he plays an Egyptian and in a Scottish film where the Scots,
immortal, the Highlander.
Yeah, Highlander, one of my absolute favorite films of all time, and it was the unofficial film of the college I went to, so I've seen it 10,000 times.
So the Scotsman's played by a Frenchman,
right?
The Egyptian is played by a Scotsman,
right?
And it's just like, wow, there were no accents in that were at all.
They call me the Spaniard. Yes,
they call me the Spaniard. Thanks very much. Or Sean's, in the Untouchables, he's an absolute typical.
He's a New York
chap No, Chicago. He's an Irish Chicago cop talking a lot like this. Thanks, Sean. Yes, the same accent as the Egyptian and the Russian, but he can get away with it.
He got away with
paid
it.
Lots. So
I don't think anyone seemed to care that much.
Well,
that's the thing. If you do the accent, if you try to do an accent and you try to do the accent poorly, everyone complains. But if you don't even bother, then no one can complain. You're like, he didn't even try. There's no point. Exactly. There's nothing to bother. There's nothing to complain about other than he didn't do it. But it's funny. I never thought of it. I mean, I love those movies, and I just don't even think about the accents that much. I guess I don't know. I guess
it's interesting.
I'm not an accent snob.
It's interesting with accents, and then I'll shut up forever. That there was. We accept some accents in replacement to others, and like for instance, with Romans, we're somehow fine with Brits, being I am Caesar, and that's fine. Whereas of course, it should be Italian, and I am Caesar, or what? No, that's not an Italian accent. But we accept the Brits. We accept the Brits being Romans. But then there was this an American show. I can't remember with the Standard, where they're going after the Standard, and there was a group of Americans playing Romans and
13th Legion or something like that.
It just didn't go down well. When we heard Americans doing Roman, that's not a Roman. He's got an American accent.
Well, they always ask why are all the bad guys British? And especially in Star Wars, all the Star Wars bad guys have to be British. They have
Legacy
to be.
of Empire, I feel.
It's why when I was at Gen Con, I'm so tempted to turn up in one of those Death Star officer uniforms, the grey one, and just be really abrupt and rude to everyone. Because that's what every one of those Star Wars officers does.
I'd love it. You get a lot of respect, I tell you. You probably get to cut all those lines. You just show up, everyone would be like, "Ooh, doesn't want to mess with him."
Yeah, exactly.
So we do have to go. We've almost talked for 2 hours, and I actually
hold on. I'm going to try to do a goblin.
Oh, you're going to do it. You're going to try. Oh boy.
There is absolutely no one apart from yourself who can prevent you in the middle of the night from sneaking down to tidy up the edges of that hunk of cheese at the back of the fridge.
Wow.
He's not the Messiah.
He's a very naughty boy. No, I thought that was brilliant. And a very good English accent as well, Mark.
Wow. Mark has two secret accents he could do. Goblin and dolphin. Those are the two secret ones.
Hard.
His dolphin is amazing. I will say, I can't do accents. I'm not even going to bother. I'm terrible. I can barely speak English. I barely do my accent. I don't even know what it is. But
it's a Stephen Glicker accent.
It's whatever I am. I don't know. It's a New York accent where everyone makes fun of me for saying things New Yorky, but whatever. What can I do? I'm from here. That's the way I talk. Anyhow, we like barely touched the subject because I could talk about this. I did actually, believe it or not, learn a bit because I'm still finishing up our adventure path, and our adventure path is gargantuan, and is all linked. And listening to you, at least, Oliver, was useful for me because that's how we set it up. It's like we set up the whole adventure path and had everything linked because things that happened in the first book happened in the third book, and then PCs you meet can be reused and so forth. So there's a lot of connective tissue, and it is fascinating that mine's much more linear. It's a very linear adventure. It has branching, but to a point, because it's actually it's not a railroad. I call it a roller coaster. It is very roller coastery, but it's a single story, and it's designed that way because it allows you to also then go in very specific directions and do very specific things. I find the more you branch, the harder it gets to control the story. So ours is designed that way, but it was, listening to you, at least for me, very interesting. Now that I'm dealing with this and how you set this up. So I could talk about that for a while. But I also am very curious to then try these books out as a role-playing game and play it with friends rather than me doing all of these myself.
Do a Roll for Combat podcast or something. I'll GM it. It's easy. I just have to read a book.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's like,
how hard can that be?
I know. Well, there's a little bit because there's a lot. You do have to keep track of stuff.
I'm
there's
sure
a lot
to keep
of tracking.
track of a lot of details.
There's a lot of
that
tracking.
Seems like something you can't just memorize. With,
No.
the amount of stuff that's going
Unless
on.
you're Oliver, he can memorize it.
Well, there is also which is quite useful. We had a fan produced piece of work that came out just after our
like an Excel or something.
Is it a spreadsheet?
No. I mean, we were thinking an Excel spreadsheet with a little bit of intelligence behind it with macros would be great. No. This was an app developer down under in Australia who knocked out a complete Legendary Kingdoms app. It's amazing.
Ooh,
it's available both on Apple, on the iOS system, as well as on Android. And you can actually download it on the Google Game Store or Apple Store as well. And it is a phenomenal companion app that allows you to keep track of a lot of stuff that you would otherwise be scribbling down in notepads. If that's your thing, like, for example, if Mark, you were wanting to run a campaign, you can open up your tablet next to you and keep track of everything there as well.
It's very clever. It's got all the items, so when you find an item in the book, you can select it from a list, goes onto your character sheet.
I just downloaded it now. That's a great idea. We actually, one quick question. What defines a choose your own adventure versus a super detailed adventure, the role play?
Oh, it's a fine question. I'm not sure I understand it. I mean, choose your own adventure is obviously primarily with a role-playing game, you're freer. So although everyone who writes game books tries to create the options that they think players will pick, there's never one for I'll propose to the goblin, instead of offering a bribe, or I'll reach into my pack and throw ball bearings and hope that the ogre trips up. You can do that in a role-playing game. In a game book, you can only do that if the author has thought of it ahead of time. I think it's the big difference. But I mean, in terms of game books, I think as we've covered, they go in different scales. Legendary Kingdoms is not the game book you want to play if you're on a train for half an hour and you're on a quick distraction. Choose Your Own Adventure is perfect for that. There's no dice, you just flick through. Legendary Kingdoms is, if you can't get a group together or no one wants to be a DM, and I remember there was a period of almost 7 years of my life where I wasn't able to play Dungeons and Dragons, and I was dependent on these tiny solo exercises. And I think Legendary Kingdoms fills in that gap. It's a case of it's like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. It's not a one-off thing. You're taking your players and you're going where you like, when you like, and you're taking on the quests that you want to do, the time that you want to do them. But the world is still evolving around you, so that when you do something, there is a consequence, there is a condition. So it's not just a flat playground where you walk there and a mission pops up. That can happen, but it's more a case of it's an evolving game world where kind of territories change hand, and the people you meet in one book you meet in another, and all those sorts of things. It's about it tries to capture that sense of what a role-playing game is. It's that impossible dream, which you can never capture. A role-playing game will, a role-playing game when you're in good company, you have a good games master, good players, and all the things falling into place. It's the most wonderful and unrecreatable thing in the world. And almost every computer RPG and game book like mine strives to try and grab it. It's the best that I can do, I think, is what I can say. And there's lots in there, from naval combat to raising armies to teleportation systems, unique magic systems. It's got lots and lots of bits in there, but you engage with what you want. And I guess that's my final pitch with it. It's, it sits at the apex level of what I think a game book can be, that point of maximum complexity before, before the apparatus falls apart and really you just need to do a solo RPG where, you have an invisible dungeon master. And that's the only step I think that you can take beyond. But at the very least, it's guided, it's written. Hopefully it's well written. I guess that's up to you. And you'll enjoy your time with it.
So I only have a few minutes left. So, John, where can we find all this stuff? People want to order this.
Best place to go. Now that the Kickstarter has ended for book 3, we still have bundles available for books 1 and 2 over on spidermindgames.com. If you'd like to give the system a go, you have the ability to go to spidermindgames.com and download a small quick start sample for free. It's the first 40 odd pages of book 1, Valley of Bones. Give it a go if you fancy trying it out for yourself. And also on the website, you can also see the other bits and pieces that we have been up to. And with regards to the Dragon Eye dice, they're currently on pre-order. They're being manufactured. And so if you wanted to grab yourself a set to be delivered to you at the same time as the backers are getting theirs, then do order yourself a pre-order set now.
So the first 40 pages, but you include all the pages that you need. It's not like, turn to 631, and you're like, oh wait, we don't have that because it's only the first 40 pages.
No, I produced a separate stripped down version.
So it's a stripped down version just to give you a taste.
That's how you make them buy it. You're like, oh, I can't go to that page. I need to buy the full book.
Well, you have to be careful. You can't do that too soon. If it's the second page, they're turning to, then they're not going to be buying it. But it's fairly generous. It's the opening section of the book, and also the first city. So you can explore the first city completely, and you do the opening adventure. If you want to leave the city, that's when you have to buy the book. But by then you'll have decided whether it's for you or not. And if you're bitten, you can either buy the full PDF or you can buy the full book, and you get the PDF with it.
Yeah. So if you buy a physical copy, we will email you a link, a downloadable link to the PDF.
Ooh, I definitely want that. And Oliver, you're just writing. You just got to keep going. You got to finish book 3 and finish book 4 and 5 and 6.
And 5 and 6, but I mean, it's a roll now. So
and we have got
secret
other
bonus
projects
7
ongoing at the same time as well. So Oliver's not allowed to have any time off because any time he's not writing the books, he's making other bits and pieces for us. So quite a lot of exciting.
That sounds familiar.
Right? Yeah,
sounds familiar.
I'm used
Mark.
to going back to the word mines.
I know. He likes the word mines. And do you have your stream tonight, Mark?
I do. That's going to be at 7 p.m. Pacific time, which is 10 p.m. Eastern time. And we have finished with Knights of Last Ball after a while in there. So we're going to do Design Diary, Anatomy of an Adventure, where we take a look at the pieces of an adventure and how to put those together in terms of adventure design. So if you're interested in that, check it out at twitch.tv/arcanemark.
And we still got the Kickstarter for about a week and a half. You can go to
Yes.
Kickstarter, rollforcombat.com. You can go to Oliver.rollforcombat.com. You can go to John. You go to almost anything.rollforcombat.com.
You can go to John Oliver at Roll.
John Oliver. It will redirect you right to our Kickstarter. And yeah, we actually also put in some pretty good stretch goals. Now you can, if we get enough, you were going to add the Centaur as a secret 13th ancestry. We have Lightness, which
it's
we already had.
Baker's dozen ancestry. It's
Baker's Dungeon. Baker's dozen. And yeah, we added some interesting and very reasonably accessible stretch goals for the next couple week and a half.
Close to Darkness Element. I've been seeing weirdly close. I've been seeing this 228,000 one like shift around and go like way up in the hundreds place and then down and then up and then down, but we're getting close to 230.
So then we'll get Darkness. And then next week we're actually going to do a couple of shows. I think we're going to have at least one or two, and we're definitely going to have Foundry back on. We'll have Nath from Foundry. He's going to be back on the show because everyone loves Foundry. And I have a couple of new guests that no one has ever seen before, but you will, I think, like them quite a bit. Yes, and then
no
of course,
one's ever seen them before.
Ever on our show. On our show.
Oh, on our show. Okay.
On our show. Mark is lawful good, by the way, so you got to be very careful with your words with him because he's more like lawful must say words accurately. So I always fall into hyper
pedants.
I always exaggerate, like, so my words are always bothering Mark because I always exaggerate to extent. But no, I definitely want to try this out. I downloaded the app. The app looks very cool. I got to put together a little group and then we can try it. And maybe I can actually be a player instead of a GM because I'm always GMing. So I'd rather be a player.
On Mark saying he'd be happy to GM it. So
I know.
There's the offer.
I know. Or we have Oliver GM it. Ooh.
Yeah, I could, as long as you remember the time differences.
Yeah,
time difference. It's only 5 hours. 5 hours. What's 5 hours?
8 hours with me.
I know it's 8 hours for Mark. So.
Oh gosh, where do you live, Mark?
West Coast,
Seattle. He lives way over there.
Oh yes.
So we are truly for now.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. So yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, we all live miles from each other.
I know.
What does that tell you about our relationships? I mean, it's
well, it's a modern world. That's what it tells you, that you can work anywhere and still get the work done. Yeah. Which is a nice thing, because if not, we would not be doing this. So, all right. Well, thanks again, and I definitely have you guys on again, especially when the third book is getting closer, or when the new Dragon Dice come out, because I want to see them in person.
Sure.
I saw them at Gen Con quickly, but I have to roll them and see how they roll.
Of course.
Are you going to roll them for combat?
Yes, I will. I will roll them for combat.
Very good. Well, thank you very much indeed for having us on. It's been a blast coming on and being able to chat.
Yes.
I'm glad we stuck to the topic. That's the
we did stick to the topic. This is about as close as we get to sticking to the topic, believe it or not.
It was tricky when I was steering it back onto the topic there.
You know what?
Very good job, Mark.
I got stuff out of it. If we talk about the topic for about 30%, I consider that a win.
Okay.
So 30% is about what we normally average.
We did all right then.
All right.
Did over 30, I think.
Ooh,
Bye, everybody.